Welcome to Sniblet number 14. Well, last week we talked about the third purpose for marriage is to move into the world with a lifelong companion. You're my lifelong companion, by the way. We began looking at Genesis chapter 2, verses 18 through 25. Now, Adam and Eve made 5 choices that are essential for lifelong companionship. The first decision they made was to believe that God had brought them together for such a time as this. Second, they received one another as God's perfect provision for them.
Over and over and over.
Yeah, it's a constant reception.
Yeah.
Let's look at the next 3 choices that we think are essential for companionship to take place. Let's look at the first part of Genesis chapter 2, verse 24. It says, "For this cause a man shall leave his father and mother." Now, Adam and Eve wrote this. They didn't have a father and mother.
Right.
So the application must be to every single one of their descendants. So what's the third choice that we need to make?
Third choice is to leave, it says in the scriptures, our father and mother, but it can in essence mean leave old ways of life, primarily meaning your parents and your family of origin. So I want us to think for a second about this command from God. It's so interesting because we can look at it from 2 different perspectives. We can look at it from the perspective of the young couple getting married or the new couple getting married, and we can look at it from those of us who are the releasing parent. So let's do that. So take a second and think about the couple. When you were there, remember that, your perspective of when you are taking off on your own. This command to leave your old ways of life gives you permission to become something new. God is giving you permission to become something maybe that you did not see or you did not have. But for those of us who have done the releasing piece of being the releasing parent, it's important for us to remember that it is a call to us to allow the couple to have the freedom to be something new and something different that maybe they are not. And we both have a difficulty doing both of those things.
Right.
You're leaving one family with a sense of starting a new family. That's what's happening. That's the big idea.
Yeah. And you know what I tell young couples that I'm doing pre-marriage counseling with? When you walk down the aisle and you say, "I do," and you consummate that marriage, you are one with each other. You're not one with your future children. You're not one with your parents. And so what I tell young couples is, a young married couple, you are not responsible for your parents' happiness. Well, flip side of that, parents, don't make your kids feel like they're responsible for your happiness.
That's really important.
Yeah.
Like, we're speaking to ourselves as well. That's very high calling.
Parents, don't make your kids feel like they're responsible for your happiness. You're
By
responsible
whether they
for your
choose
own
to
happiness.
participate with you on holidays or not, or whatever it may look like.
So let's look at the flip side of that. So third choice that we need to make is to leave. But then verse 24 also says, for this cause a man shall leave his father and mother and shall cleave to his wife.
Yeah, so that's our fourth one.
Fourth purpose.
Fourth
what is it?
choice.
Or fourth choice. What is it?
To foster this companionship is to, after we've left, then we cleave to our spouse. And I love this word. It's not one we use often in everyday language, but this is what it means. It means to cling to, adhere firmly to, loyally and unwaveringly to form a permanent bond. You're not called to cleave to your work. We're not called to cleave to our children, our friends, our hobbies, or anything else. The only thing the word calls us to cleave to is our spouse. Cleave reinforces the idea of making a permanent covenant with your spouse that we've touched about earlier, the difference between a covenant versus a contract. This is permanent. It is to hold firmly together.
Yeah, and in light of that, to cleave to one another, we very much live in a kid-centered world.
Right.
And so we've always said to couples, kids are not designed to get in the way of your marriage. Our marriage is designed to get in the way of our kids. And that's a good paradigm shift when you think about it. So we've looked at this. Let's go back to the beginning. The 4 that we've looked at so far, the 4 decisions, well, we've got to believe. We've got to receive. We've got to leave. and we've got to cleave, but we're not done yet. We've kind of got this rhyming thing
Yeah,
going here. It
that's
helps
good.
us to remember. But it says in Genesis 2:24, and they shall become one flesh. And the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed. So
we're
what's the
adding-
fifth choice?
We're making that word be weaved together as one flesh. One flesh is not just a reference to sex in this area at all. It's about this idea of vulnerability that we've discussed earlier, that we've been talking about, that leads to this emotional intimacy that God is calling us to. God designed marriage so that there could be one person in the world with whom you are naked, meaning you're fully known and fully understood, fully accepted, just like we can be with him. That's companionship.
So the idea to be fully known, fully accepted, well, I think it's best fostered in a covenant relationship, which we've talked about in the past.
Right.
And we're going to talk about that next week, how these 5 choices can be fostered best in a covenant relationship. We'll be talking about that next week. But let me review. We've talked about choices we need to make. Believe that God brought us together. To receive one another, just like Adam received Eve as God's
Over and
perfect
over
provision
and
for
over
him.
again. Yeah.
And to leave old relationships behind, that this becomes ground zero of your companionship. And then to cleave to one another, to
Right.
superglue to one another, that you're one with each other, you're not one with anyone else.
And then build in the weaving, build that intimacy both emotionally and physically together.
Yeah, and that
Yeah.
weave is really the expression of the oneness and the companionship that's there. But we need
Yeah.
to give them an assignment.
Well, I was thinking about this. Take an evening when your kids are in bed and you can sit quietly face to face. And if you're courageous enough, allow your spouse to share with you 1 or 2 things that they feel that they're fighting against for your attention.
Yeah. An example
Simple.
might be, hey, you know what, I'm spending too much time on my phone
Right.
or something, or, you know.
Or it could be
Yeah.
or it could be work or another friendship or any number of different things.
Yeah.
But take the time to allow your spouse to communicate with you what they feel that they're fighting against. Don't be defensive.
Right.
Because if they're feeling that, there's some truth to that.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit risky, but it might be a good conversation.
All right.
Yeah.
Be courageous, and we'll see you next week.